Thank you for joining us for another edition of the Commissioner's Report. I'm Tricia Pichette. Polk County's Emergency Management Division is responsible for planning and coordinating actions to prepare, respond, and recover from natural or man-made disasters in Polk County. Joining us today to explain more about the division and what they do are Paul Womble, Emergency Management Director, and Greg Becker, Emergency Management Program Manager. Thank you for joining us, gentlemen.
Thank you for having us.
Now, Mr. Womble, can you tell us how long have you been at the county?
I've been here about 14 years, just was promoted. Pete McNally, our previous Emergency Management Director, retired last year, first of the year, so I was promoted in February of last year to the Director job.
Okay. And have you always been in emergency management while you've worked for Polk County?
I have. I started out actually in the 911 Dispatch Center, which used to be part of emergency management back 20 plus years ago. Worked for the Red Cross for a little while.
Ah.
And then I went to Manatee County in emergency management, but then I've been back here. I came back in 2005 as the EM program manager, and then again promoted a little over a year ago.
Huh. And how about you, Mr. Becker?
I've been with the county since the long time of last June. We started with Polk County. Before that, I spent 30 years in the fire service and law enforcement in upstate New York. Left up there as a department chief to come down here in 2010. Similar backgrounds, came down here with the Red Cross. Went to Pinellas County for a few years and then had the opportunity to come here and become the new Paul Womble after Paul was promoted. So that's how I came to Polk County.
Well, very good. Now, usually I don't have notes, but we've got a lot to talk about, so
Okay,
I'm going to hit my notes. We have in Polk County the Emergency Operations Center. What is the purpose of the Operations Center?
So the county EOC is in what we call blue skies in normal days. I mean, our focus in emergency management is preparedness. So planning, training, exercises. We have a lot of different partners that we need to work with together in an emergency. So you don't want to meet those folks in the emergency. You need to work with them up front. So that's really the focus of in the EM program is the day-to-day work is really preparedness. So we do that at the EOC. But during emergencies, during large-scale disasters, the EOC really becomes the focal point of everything in the county to coordinate with, whether it's all 17 of our cities, the constitutionals, the volunteer, faith-based, nonprofit groups. It takes everyone working together in an emergency, so we bring all those representatives together. Decisions are made by the board, the county manager's office, other stakeholders, for example. It depends on the type of the incident. So if it was some type of domestic situation or disturbance, potentially the sheriff would be there as part of a policy group. It could be the Department of Health director if it was some type of a health-related emergency, a pandemic, for example. So we bring all those folks together, and our job then in the EOC is really to coordinate their response, interface with our partners within the county, interface with our neighbors, interface with state government, federal government agencies. We're really a coordinating entity is what we do there.
One-stop shop then.
That's the goal, is to bring, there's lots of stakeholders when we have an emergency. So our job is to bring them all together, make sure everybody's working together. We have a common set of objectives, policy decisions that have to be made or that need to be made. So having everybody under one roof really just makes that possible.
So the EOC is the point of contact. It's the place where all these people gather. How do you stay up to date? How do you practice for something like a hurricane?
Yeah, we use this like a spring training analogy for the baseball fans. You just don't walk out to the last game of the World Series and win, or get to the last 2 minutes of the Super Bowl and win without having practiced the fundamentals. So we just spent time last week with a statewide hurricane exercise where we brought in our sheltering partners, for example, and we walked through that scenario of what would we do if, in the case of the scenario this year, was a major hurricane impacting the Tampa Bay area. We've started training, actually we start training county staff and all the other partner agencies, working with them really right after the first of the year. So while most people think that hurricane season starts June the 1st, which is true, it does, for us getting ready for hurricane season typically starts about in mid-January.
Well, let's talk about some of the preparations that would go into an event such as a hurricane. So you mentioned shelters. How many kinds of shelters are there?
Oh, we have 3 types of shelters. I'll cover the first 2, and then Greg can talk about the special needs program. So our first type are what we call general population shelters, and they're in schools. We partner very closely with the Polk County School Board to use their facilities and McKeel Academy. That's where our shelters are. They're all in schools, and they're safer places for people to go. Our evacuation policy in Polk County is primarily based on winds and flooding rain. We do not have pre-identified evacuation zones like you'll see in coastal counties. That's based off of storm surge, the water from the Gulf or the Atlantic that a hurricane would push up on the land. We're far enough inland where that's not a hazard. But high winds, so people in mobile homes, manufactured homes, RVs, any type of housing where wind could impact the housing, folks need to have somewhere to go. So general pop is just that, for where most people could go in an emergency. We have pet-friendly shelters. We have 3 of those, up to 3 of those that we can activate. Again, the partnership between the county school board and the Polk County Sheriff's Office, their animal control division. It's for people that have pets that are part of their family that need to evacuate and they don't have any other option. It's not a dog or cat drop-off service. Those people have to come with their pets in a carrier and bring supplies. And with the animal control staff and the school board staff, again, they're able to have a safer place to shelter than in their RV or in their house that might be impacted by winds. And it gives them a safer place to go.
Having said that, it's important to note, as a pet owner, it's important to note that you have to have your pet current on their shots to
Correct.
take them to a shelter.
Correct. Need to have them current on their shots. Again, bring supplies. We'll talk about supply kits and how that applies to everything we're talking about today.
Okay.
It's really an important part is have a plan based off your specific family, work, your requirements based on your situation. Everybody's situation is different.
So what makes a special needs shelter different?
Our special needs program is really talking about folks with special medical needs who, for whatever reason, if they need to leave their home or whatever their care environment is, they would not be able to be safe or adequately cared for in a general population shelter because it may not, they may be electrically dependent. They may have appliances, ventilators, oxygen concentrators, or things that really require electricity to keep them safe and healthy. They may have medical needs for ongoing care, ongoing treatment that can't be provided for in a general population shelter with just general staff. So we work in partnership with the health department to provide safe spaces with appropriate medical care, appropriate staff, where those folks can come with their caregivers, with their equipment, and be assured of a safe location where they can be well and have their needs provided for. We also work in partnership with hospitals and other advanced care facilities for folks who may reside at home for whatever stage they are in what their illness or their situation is, but may need even a higher level of care during that time period that could be provided for in a special needs shelter.
Okay, wow. Now, next here it says Alert Polk. What is the Alert Polk system?
So part of having a plan, everyone should have a disaster plan. Part of that is being able to be informed if there's an emergency. Now, hurricane is going to get a lot of media attention. You would at least have a few days warning that it's coming, and we would be impacted here in Polk County, and you need to activate your plan. We have other hazards that are very short notice, and that's, again, it's important, especially if it's at the middle of the night. Some of those hazards with very little warning time could be severe weather, tornadoes, hazardous materials, any type of situation like that where you would need to get an alert from authorities to take some kind of action. So Alert Polk is our emergency notification system here in the county. It's used by county divisions, it's used by the sheriff's office, and it's a way that we can rapidly notify people through text messages, a voice call to your cell phone or your home phone or even your business, an email. There's multiple ways that you can opt in. You have to register for the system.
Okay.
And you can control the numbers, the times of day that we call. You can set a do not disturb time. If If you didn't want to be notified for some reason of particular hours of the day, you can specify that, and the types of, again, devices. But it's automatically tied into 3 types of severe weather warning. So a tornado warning, severe thunderstorm warning, and a aerial flood warning are the 3 most likely types of weather hazards. And that's automated, so when those warnings are issued directly by the National Weather Service, we don't have to intervene. We don't have to be on a system and mash a button. So all those are triggered automatically. Now, tornado warnings you cannot opt out of. If you register for the system, you're going to get those 24 hours a day. But the other things you can control.
Now, I used to have a weather radio, and when there was, let's say, a water spout off Ruskin, I would get the notification, and
Yep.
that got on my nerves,
Right.
to be honest with you. Is this specific to Polk?
It is, and it can be, and you can adjust the weather radios these days to a much more confined area to where you live using codes that are in the weather radios. But it's important to note that any kind of notification system like this, redundancies and failbacks are always a good thing. So even if you have information that's sent to your phone, you forget to plunk your phone in, the cat bumps the charger and it's not quite in the socket all the way, you don't want your phone to be dead in the middle of the night. So even though you have that system, we still encourage people to have weather radios programmed from them for their areas, just as a second layer of information and information flow. So.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, so how can a resident prepare for something like a hurricane? It says evacuation. I'm assuming, knowing that you're one of those groups that would need to evacuate, which you've already gone through. It says here survival kits. Now, what is a survival kit? What do people need?
Well, a survival kit is just that. Think about what you would need to take with you to be able to be healthy and whole for what used to be a period of 3 days, but now the federal and state governments are talking about periods of 5 days is good, 7 days is better, where you can expect to be on your own. On your own here may be in a shelter, but there are things that you might have at home that you need to take with you. For example, medications. If the pharmacies are closed, if the power's out, you may not be able to get medications. We always recommend that folks take some cash with them because they can't get access. Today is the plastic society, or Apple Pay does everything. But if the power's out or the support infrastructure like the internet is down at those locations, you can't pay for things that you might need in the immediate recovery. Sure. Take other healthcare items, personal items that you need to be comfortable, and to make sure that you're healthy and your family or your pet or whoever else you have with you can be healthy and whole through that time period.
So a shelter isn't a magic bubble where everything's provided
we
for
wish
you.
they were. Shelters are really a lifeboat. A shelter is not the cruise ship, it's the lifeboat that you get off to keep yourself alive. Yeah. We're fortunate here in Polk County that we don't have the surge risk, but we do have a lot of folks in mobile homes, or who are otherwise the folks we talked about who are electrically dependent. We may have folks that need to evacuate because they're threatened by heavy rains and rising floodwaters in certain areas. So they need somewhere to go, even though they're not evacuating from surge. So those are the things that they would have ready, bring with them. The time to put together a survival kit is not when the evacuation order is issued.
A lot of people
it's a
do
little
that.
late by that. They absolutely do. And that's why we make sure we get out and start talking about preparedness early. We'll talk a little bit later about preparedness events that we have coming up and other good information sources for people. But think about the things you'll need. Medication is always a big one. Cash, any specialty food items that you may need. If you're in a shelter, we do our best to meet dietary needs, but if you have special things that you have to have with you, chances are it's a good idea to bring them with you, because we can't single source everyone's needs in that type of environment.
Yeah. Okay. Now everybody likes to, whenever there's a storm coming, you go into one of the, Lowe's or Home Depot or something, and everybody wants a generator. Let's talk about generators, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So if your plan is to either stay at home during the storm, or even if you come home, you go somewhere else after the storm, but then you come back and there's no power. We saw after Hurricane Irma here a couple of years ago, we saw some parts of the county, people didn't have power for, I think the most I've heard talking to people is 14 or 15 days, so 2 weeks. If you have no power at your house for 2 weeks and your plan is to have a generator, you have to know how to use it safely. The first part of that is where to put it. Can't not be inside. The exhaust gas is dangerous and can be deadly. Unfortunately, here in Polk County and Irma, we had quite a few instances where people were overcome by the fumes. Unfortunately, we had one young girl who died because of that. The family just didn't know. I mean, it was a tragic accident. So it can't be inside, it can't be in your garage, it can't be outside right under the window or somewhere where that gas can get back into the house. It's odorless, you don't even know it's there. So somewhere that has to be away from people, or so that exhaust gas will not come into the house and people can be exposed. Second part is how to hook it up. If you were to actually hook that generator up to your house, the improper way, you can back feed the electrical system, and then the folks that are coming to restore your power, you could actually hurt them. Yikes. With the power from the generator. So you want to plug things in to the generator directly, not into the house. Definitely without not having had an electrician or somebody that really understands how all that works with transfer switches and the necessary equipment to keep it safe. Really, those generators should just be looked at as, gee, how can I maybe power a couple of lights so you're not having to use candles, for example, and have a fire hazard, and be able to keep some food, cold, so it's safe. It's really a safety thing. It should not be designed to try to power your house. You can do that, but they have to be properly installed, tested, and all those things that would come along with it. But the biggest thing with generators is the safety and making sure you operate them safely.
Okay. It says now home safety and business continuity plans. What home safety? We've spoken about generators. What are some of the preparations you can do at your house for a wind event like a hurricane?
Well, assuming you're planning on staying, you want to plan for the power to go out. You want to plan for your water not to be available for you for a period of time. You want to plan not to be able to get out to the store. So think about those things as you might have some type of storage containers at your home for water. A few gallons a day per person should cover basic sanitation needs, basic drinking and food preparation needs. Fill up your bathtub. If you need to flush toilets, you can do that with a bucket out of your tub, rather than if your regular water system isn't working. When you're talking about preparing your home itself, I'll tell you that the only people who benefit from you taping up all your windows is the tape manufacturers. It really does nothing except to make it so you can't see out your windows. If you have hurricane shutters or something else to protect your home, that's certainly an option. One of the biggest things you can do, though, is remove loose items and loose objects from your yard, stow them away, weigh them down, and help your neighbors to do the same thing, because that way your neighbor's picnic table doesn't become the missile that takes out your back door. Working in your neighborhood and with your neighbors to do that kind of thing makes it much more effective, because you can have the cleanest yard in the world, but stuff blows and gets there from other places. Reinforcing your garage door. One of the challenges with hurricanes that we talk about is that there are frequently tornadoes associated with hurricanes. So we need to expect not only the longer-term sustained winds that we might have with hurricanes, but periods of very intense wind, EF0, EF1 level tornadoes that can really blow and push things around. So reinforcing your home, obviously if you're in a mobile home, leave, go to someplace safe. But doing some of the improvements to bring your home up to the building code in terms of internal roof strapping, or working with construction folks to make sure that your doors are reinforced, your windows are reinforced, your garage door is reinforced, and eliminating ways for that wind to get inside your home, that's what creates the damage.
Now for things like mobile home straps, that's something that, okay, you buy your home and the straps are fine, but over time those things loosen, and that's something that you kind of have to keep on top of, right?
That's really part of maintenance.
Yeah.
Again, for wind, you want to make sure the wind can't get inside the home, or for mobile homes that it doesn't able to lift it up. Mm-hmm. So those straps should have some type of periodic assessment to make sure that, things settle, they change, as other storms have come through. We've since the 2004 hurricane season, we went through 3 storms in 2004. We've had a couple of tropical storms since then. And then, of course, Hurricane Irma here in 2017. So in those 2 decades, there's houses that, less than 2 decades. There's some homes that have been through 4 hurricanes and at least 2 tropical storms. So, those and our normal wind events that we get with severe weather and throughout the year. So you have to be able to to stay on top of those things.
And there are trees, for example, that went through the 2004 hurricane season and they're fine, and then Irma comes along, to be frank, over 10 years later, and the tree can't withstand the storm anymore. So that's also something you're kind of looking at your yard and taking stock of the living things that are there, as well as,
Yeah, trees, trees, they have a lifespan, they get pests, they decay for whatever is going on. So that should be another part of your preparedness, is to recognize, hey, I've got a tree that's got a great big dead limb up in it, and if it wind blows, it's going to come down and probably hit my house. So that's all part of taking care of your house.
Well, if we could, can we talk about some of the things we learned from events like Charlie and Irma? What are some of the things we learned?
Biggest thing is for folks to have a plan, whether it's at home, in your business. One of the things that happens after a storm is, if we're included in a presidential disaster declaration, a lot of folks think the federal government is just going to come in and bail them out with all this money, and that's not the case. The FEMA programs, they're very specific for the things that they cover, and the list of what they don't cover is much larger than what they do. Insurance is always your first line of defense. Homeowners insurance, renters insurance. If you have damage, if your home is destroyed, or even if it's not destroyed, but if you need repairs, the government programs from all levels are not going to come in and just totally put you right back where you were. They're designed to help. Federal programs are designed for habitability, which means it might be okay for you to live in the house, but it doesn't mean it's right back where it was. So insurance is important. Know what your policy does not cover. In many instances, in many cases around Polk County, we have areas that will flood. If you get just a few inches of rain in a short amount of time, that water comes up, and typical homeowner's policy does not cover rising water. It takes flood insurance. So you need to understand what those hazards are, make sure you're properly insured. What does your deductible work on your insurance? Hurricane deductibles are typically 1 or 2% different than other types of incidents. So do the math and figure out, based on the value of your home, what's 2% and how much am I out of pocket going to be, and think about it from that perspective. What does your policy not cover? How do I get a hold of my agent, on a Saturday afternoon when we've just had a hurricane and phones are down, and I've got to file a claim, and what information, what's my policy number, all those things. Inventory of your home. At some point, if you're claiming damages, you may have to prove the valuables and the value of things that you had. So that should be all part of that.
So it sounds like your insurance information is also something you should have with you in
Absolutely.
the shelter.
Yeah.
And if an interesting thing that we've seen from the last couple of storms in the islands, but also in the Panhandle, is that folks, in order to be eligible for some assistance, need to be able to prove that they own the property. They may need to have a deed or somewhere recorded, and in a lot of cases where you have more rural areas where folks are living in different areas that may be segmented, the family owns the entire property, but somebody lives here, somebody lives there. Having that information detailed out in advance will make it much easier for you to provide the required documentation for assistance if it comes on later on down.
Well,
I want to come back to something really briefly
Yeah.
that we mentioned before. I skipped over business continuity. We spend a lot of time talking about home preparedness. There's a stat that came out last year after a study, and I don't remember the exact number, but it was pretty close to 50% of small businesses in communities that are significantly impacted by hurricanes or by other natural disasters never reopen their doors again. That's a huge
Wow.
number,
Yeah,
especially
it is.
when you look around a county like ours and you see how much of our business community is small business, mom and pop, family type operations. So going back to insurance, it's an expense that on blue sky days, as we say, nobody wants to think about paying. But you talk about fire insurance, and you may have fire insurance. Think about how these businesses may be impacted. Think about who your customer base is. Think about if the county's closed, are your customers mostly employees who are going to be out of work, who aren't going to be able to come and spend money with you? talk to insurance providers and other folks in your business community to see what kind of preparations they're making and how you can make yourself more resilient in the event of an impact. As you're taking care of your own family, as you're taking care of your own personal losses. Remember, you have that business situation. The sooner they can get reopened and providing services in the community, the more likely they are to be successful in remaining in business.
Excellent. Gentlemen, this has been very interesting, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Appreciate it. It's comforting to know that Polk County's emergency management has staff, systems, facilities, and procedures in place to prepare for, respond to, and recover from threatened or actual natural or man-made disasters. To learn more about these topics like disaster preparedness, emergency shelters, and the Alert Polk system, you can visit their website at www.polk-county.net/emergency-management or visit their Facebook page at Polk County EM.
Don't wait. Communicate. Make your emergency plan today.
It's a beautiful day out here. Sunny today with light breezes, giving way to clouds in the afternoon. We could see some light precipitation to moderate precipitation later on, followed by powerful storm-like conditions. 90 miles per hour winds are expected. Authorities are asking everyone, stay indoors.